What's going on, everybody? Happy Tuesday night. Welcome to Deep in the Plus. I'm your host, Rob Whiteside, and tonight we will be talking about a very distinguished movie, and a distinguished movie needs a distinguished man to talk about it. This is the best I could get. Please welcome Axel.
Episode, how much? What's the count on the episodes right now?
This is episode 63, our 63rd movie review on Deep in the Plus.
63rd, and my very first one, so let's make it memorable.
Well, you know what? I just like the way that you say three in that really cool accent, so that's why I chose you for 63.
I'm disappointed that I didn't get any other number, but hey, let's do it.
Okay, so tonight this was Axel's pick, and he said, "Hey, I can only come on if I'm going to do something pretty highbrow." And so what he said he'd like to come on and do is Howard. And the first time that I heard about this movie, I first thought of this. I mean, immediately, and that's sad. I know, because Howard the Duck was the first thing that came into my mind when somebody said Howard, because Disney is huge into Marvel. They're bringing Howard the Duck back, and you know that I was just like, oh, okay, well, like Howard, that's what's going to happen. So it was not D23, it was the shareholders meeting 2019 that actually came to Raleigh, North Carolina, and they introduced a lot of stuff coming to Disney Plus, and they talked about Howard. So Howard is actually a biography of Howard Ashman, part of Ashman and Menken. Disney, Axel, has had an amazing group of songwriters over the years. You start with the Sherman brothers, Ashman and Menken, and then now you've got the folks who make Frozen. I mean, it's like, and then Lin-Manuel Miranda's in the wings. He's getting ready, to put something together. So you got the Lopez's, and these guys were partners, and they made some incredible music.
They did, and I think for the short amount of time that Howard Ashman, and I'm not going into the duo, like Alan Menken was of course, Howard Ashman brought Alan Menken on when he was brought onto Disney. But I think it's important to know that we have this documentary about this man that basically for Disney did 3 movies. That was it. And I think the impact he had on those movies and on the way we look at those movies and the way we carry them with us up until this day, it's just huge. I think it's for me 3 of my favorite movies of all time that Disney ever did.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that in a little bit. I want to start, though, by saying that I feel like this man was a genius. And obviously, when you put together a picture like this, you want to tell the story in the best light possible. If you go back and you watch something about Walt Disney, you go, wow, there will never be another man like this. Just looking at, what a visionary, all the risks he took, all the cool things he had, all the ideas that he brought to the table. Jim Henson, I think of Steve Jobs the same way. And you look at it and you're like, how did these people coexist with the rest of us peons, and just have these amazing legacies that they left behind? And I think the same thing as I'm watching this about Howard Ashman, and a lot of other things came to light. How does, you're a creative guy, how does a mind like that work to just bring so much of this to the table? The lyrics are amazing.
I think, and it's one of those things where you see a lot of those same aspects coming back from a lot of creative people, is that it started off from a very young age. Like you see that they're different, even in a very young age. And especially if you look at the documentary, having this vivid imagination as a kid just helped to grow in what he did. And especially as a young kid and growing up back in the 60s, 70s, it's not easy to be a man and I want to be something creative, and the creative will not be a writer, but I like dance, I like singing, and that's not always accepted within the family or within the greater community. So I think it's being different from other people, but starting off so young, and that's a lot of things you see alike. I mean, if you look at the pictures of Walt dressed up as Abraham Lincoln, it's one of those things where you think like he had this vivid imagination, and I think that Howard Ashman definitely can go into this same row of people, like you said, like Jim Henson, Steve Jobs, Walt Disney, and Howard Ashman, and there's plenty more, but I think he definitely deserves that spot.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I lump him in with them when I hear that. So let me just explain something though, from my standpoint, is that I don't usually love documentaries, and I think that's probably weird. But part of the thing about documentaries and real life movies that I have is that I'm always waiting for that shoe to drop. I know that the Titanic is going to sink. I know that that's a thing. So when I'm watching the movie Titanic, I'm too distracted the entire time about the fact that the Titanic's going to sink. The same thing with just like documentaries. In this particular documentary that he passes away. That's part of kind of Disney history, is that Alan Menken, Howard Ashman, great, huge, dynamic duo, and sadly, Howard Ashman passed away far too soon. So usually I don't love a documentary, but I do love a documentary when it's a chance for me to learn something new about something that I feel like I already know and love. And I think that that's why a lot of the documentaries that are on Disney Plus appeal to me, whether it's The Boys or Howard or Waking Sleeping Beauty. It's because I can learn more about something that I already love. So for me, like, it's hard for me to get into documentaries. I watched this one because you mentioned, you encouraged it, and I watched it. What is it that draws you to Howard, that made you want to watch it?
Well, it's not like something that I said like, oh, I was this connoisseur of Disney history. I mean, the first time, and it's the songs that we know from Aladdin, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast. And then, like back in the days where we crazy young people used to have DVDs and Blu-rays, I got Waking Sleeping Beauty, and in Waking Sleeping Beauty, there's this part dedicated to Howard Ashman, and it's only at that point that you realize what impact that he had on those movies. So you have to like imagine that it's not the writers, it's not the screenplay, but it's the biggest impact came from his ideas, from his songs, from his lyrics, and that was like a point was like this man did like amazing things, and it's not that a lot of people know about. It's not that you think constantly about it when you watch the movie. It's like, oh, great. We know it's different with the Sherman Brothers. Like you walk into a park and or you go into the Carousel of Progress. Like, oh yeah, Sherman Brothers. Oh, Mary Poppins. Yeah, Sherman Brothers. They were connected to Disney way more than Howard Ashman was. And it's by seeing that, and especially the words, and it came back. It was in Wake and Sleep and Beauty. It was in Howard, where Roy Disney, well, not Roy, like Roy E. Disney. So like, well, in many ways, he made me think of Walt because he had this passion, he had this influence on people to make them better. And I think that's one of those things where you can make, again, a line to Walt, to Jim Henson or Steve Jobs. Those people were so enthusiastic. They believed in what they did that they could get other people to be just as involved in the project. And even though that everybody's like, oh no, that's will never work. And all of a sudden you have like Howard Ashman say, well, we're going to do it that way and it will work. It's one of those things where when you watch it, like, okay, his impact was pretty great. And it's a sad thing that he left the world too soon, because I think his impact could have been like way bigger than it already is and was.
Yeah, I wrote down that same that Roy Disney that moment in the documentary where he says, "Don't want to compare him to Walt, but he had that kind of influence on people, is what he said, and it's again, it's stuff that you didn't necessarily know. So let's back up to the start of this movie. 2018, it was in the Tribeca Film Festival, and then, like I said, they announced it for Disney Plus. It came to Disney Plus on August 2020. It was directed by Don Hahn, who was the producer of Beauty and the Beast. Had music from Alan Menken, so this was like basically, I think, a passion project for all of these folks who had known Howard so well. When it first starts out, it feels to me very Smithsonian, like the kind of thing that I would have seen growing up outside of DC. We used to go to the Smithsonian a lot in DC, and it feels very there's not a lot of video. It's a lot of still images with voiceover. And so that part of it is a little bit dry, I think, but then they do a really good job of mixing in, a light score, finding people who were close to him. His mother is there. His sister talks in it a lot. And then as you go through his life, other people who were important to him later come into play. But one of the things, and you talk about like not knowing, like learning things about them later. This is one of the things that I saw in this documentary that I was like, really? Apparently, and there's Howard Ashman. Apparently he actually was asked to edit the Mickey Mouse Club storybook. So, like, already early on, he had some ties to Disney. So he was, there's this cool picture of him at Disneyland. Like, that's a really neat thing to me that, that he had those ties early on. But, apparently he didn't really enjoy editing someone else's work. He wanted to create his own. And so, like, that was kind of his genesis into, opening up his own theater with his friend in New York at a very scary time. Like, I look at that footage and go, why in the world would you go to New York in that time? Right?
It's one of those things where I tried to find like the sweet spot. So if like I'm gonna watch this because I'm very passionate about it, and if I would have any of the Disney fans, like you're gonna make it like over half of this documentary before we're starting to talk more about Disney and the involvement with Disney. But before and up until Little Shop of Horrors, it was not that he was a known name. It was not that he had a camera crew running behind him every single day. So that's why there's a lot of stills and from private collections. But the most inspiring thing happens in like this first half of the documentary. It's like, oh, sure, you don't want to do my work. You don't want to work with me. Sure, we'll make our own theater. Don't worry. We'll find a space and then we'll get the people behind it and then we'll start our own thing. And that's one of those things. Like, man, could you imagine doing that today? Where it's like, oh, you don't want to hire me? Good, I'll start my own company. And here we go. And it's different because we're back in the 70s. Things were different, but it succeeded. It succeeded for that specific crowd and time. One of the names that is mentioned early on because he was a managing director was Peter Schneider, who ended up at Disney as well. And then that's one of the parts where you think, like, oh, they were connected, so they knew each other, which is nice to see that, like, there's a lot of connection, a lot of like who knows who, but it's great when you can tie everything in.
Yeah. I get what you're saying, like, that there wasn't anybody following him around, but I feel like pretty much, I feel like a lot of people have footage these days. I don't know. They did a really good job creating that, like, sort of, as his sister was talking about this world that he made for her to entertain her as a little kid. They clearly recreated that and shot something that was pretty neat. But I get what you're saying. So you mentioned Little Shop of Horrors. That was another thing that I was like, I don't know that I knew that he had written the music for Little Shop of Horrors, nor was I as familiar with the fact that Little Shop of Horrors like existed before this as this like weird movie, just like a movie. And that's Jack Nicholson, if I'm not mistaken, in the director in the dentist chair here. And so the original story of that he adapted of Little Shop of Horrors to a musical was just like a bad movie. And then he decided, hey, I'm going to make this a musical, and then he just makes a super huge hit out of it. So to your point about like other people won't listen to me, other people won't hire me, I'm going to start my own thing. Sounds very familiar. Walt Disney basically did the same thing. So
No.
I mean, I'm just shocked, like at like his genius starting back to again, like the Little Shop of Horror days, even, because that was brilliant that he did that. And apparently, that was one of those things where people were like, you're going to take a bad movie and make it into a musical. That's never going to work. And then they made a movie out of
What?
it.
And then they made a movie out of it.
Yeah.
No,
Uh,
I think it's definitely one of those things where if you're not a brilliant but also crazy mind, it's not something you want to put your hands in. Like you need to be like convinced that like I can make this work, because do you want to set it all on the line for this? And he got away with it. He did it.
yeah. Well, and I love that movie, like the Steve Martin and as the dentist, and Rick Moranis, and using I forget her name, but the same woman who played Audrey in his musical was Audrey in the movie. So it's just really neat to see the genesis of this, and then he meets somebody and he asks them out on a date, and the first date they go to is the Oscars because he's nominated for an Oscar. And again, just like over the top. I mean, the idea of like the way that this guy like was living at that time is kind of amazing.
And that's the after he ended his first relationship, it was a long time relationship. And if you look at the documentary, there's a lot of sad parts. If you see, he loses his basically best friend since school, life partner, until they decided to part ways. And it's this thing where you like, even though this is happening, he always continued. And I think it's also important that this documentary shows a side that is not always the happiest to see. And that's, I mean, a documentary, yes, you need this, but this is one that's on Disney Plus, that's accessible for everyone. So how do you want to bring this message towards the grand public? And it's they did a good job in portraying it with great respect.
Yeah. I do think that's kind of a little bit of a Disney story, right? Like, the guy comes from nothing, he starts to build up, he loses it, and then in the end, he's triumphant. It's not the same thing here, but his legacy is definitely triumphant. So I do think that there is that roller coaster ride of emotions that does match a Disney movie, but I definitely see what you're saying on that. I for me, just seeing like the idea that he knew how creative and how good he was, and that he continued like to push the envelope and and take risks. Except when you talk about all of the big hits, there was also like the Marvin Hamlish musical that he put together called Smile, which was not as successful. And and looking at that and hearing it now, it's kind of like I want that to be a musical again. I want them to go back and go, hey, you know what? Let's reprise this whole thing and make this a musical, because it looks like it would have been kind of cool. No?
It did, but on it was one of those things that needed to happen for him to make the step towards the work he did at Disney. Because he was perfectly happy and fine in New York and doing the musicals. It's just because that one didn't work out, and it's not even the public. It's like the people that were considered the know-alls of New York Broadway theaters said like, nope, it's nothing, it's not good, we don't want it, and then it's canned. Even if you had like a great first night and opening, no, you're canned. So if you see the few images they did from that, I'm like, this right now is like, it would still work. This would be like the thing where you go to New York and like, oh, Cats is still on. Wow, it must be like what 50 years they play this thing. I think that Smile could definitely be one of those. But yeah.
So in this one, which here's the scene from like wrapping up from I don't think this is from Smile, but this is from Smile. And there's a song in it called
Yeah.
Disneyland, which again I'm thinking again how ironic that there's a song called Disneyland. And then here's Jodie Benson in Smile, and this is where like they made that connection that Jodie Benson was cast into this role in Smile, and she was kind of the star of it. There's Marvin Hamlish. This was while Jodie Benson was talking a little bit about the production. But yeah, I see what you're saying. Like, yeah, you could bring this back. It seemed like it was, you know, on pace to win, on pace to work. They had the funding cut because, like you said, they decided to pull out at the last minute because they didn't believe in it. Howard did. He you know bankrolled it. Got some new investors into it, and then it failed. And so then he was distraught. And you're right, that does lead to the next level when he's looking forward to Disney, or looking, you know, he gets the letter from Jeffrey Katzenberg, which I think that letter, like I paused on that letter a lot, looking at it, trying to figure it out, what was going on with it. So I want to cue it up and just kind of show the letter. But so he's kind of down the dumps. Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was, you know, in charge of Disney animation, writes him this letter. And so it says in it, like, you know, glad we had a chance to talk. And this was in 1986. This was 3 years before Mermaid. And he's like, here's some projects we're working on. And it says, Little Mermaid, you know, we talked about you doing 5 or 6 songs. Doofus, I'm enclosing a short summary of an animated film for your reaction. An animated film called Doofus. And then it says, Mary Poppins, a period sequel. So even at this point in 86, they're considering a Mary Poppins sequel. Like, I love this letter. Like, I just kept looking through, like, I want to know about Doofus. Like, why didn't Doofus work other than the title? Yeah. So, I mean, and in it, there's a line at the very end of it. And I'm looking for it right now to see it because, again, I jotted it down because I thought it was really cool the way it was worded. Jeffrey Katzenberg says, the combination of Howard Ashman's talent and the Walt Disney name is a home run waiting to happen.
And he was right.
Yeah.
I mean, Jeffrey Katzenberg might not have been like the best guy that ever walked the floors of Disney, but I mean, he was right, and he did spot talent, and it's also because of Jeffrey that Peter Snyder started out at Disney, and I think it's one of those moments in history that it just happened at the right time. There were steps made, a lot of steps made into Mermaid. And I think it was like right on time, right on the spot, where he got this thing where I don't want to be in New York right now. I just want to get away. And this was the perfect getaway. So I think the moment was just right. It couldn't be off by any month or week. This was like, this is the time.
Yeah, that's true. So I mean, the same thing about the Disney animation in general. Like, again, them talking about Disney's legacy had dwindled. They'd moved animation off the lot. They didn't even care about animation. It's hard to imagine Disney giving up on animation, but they were saying that, like, they had to move them to a trailer. And then, you know, here comes Howard Ashman. And honestly, this movie makes it feel like he kind of saved the day. And if you think about the movies that were out there at the time, you had The Black Cauldron and Oliver and Company and, you know, The Great Mouse Detective and some movies that I like, but they were no Little Mermaid. Little Mermaid changed the game. And a lot of the things that he brought to the table, and again, I was not there, but according to this, you know, this documentary, he taught them a lot about the purpose of music into the musical, because he brought that with him, and the animators were just in awe. It was like they were being schooled a little bit, right? It was like he was throwing a TED talk.
One of those moments is where they say, like, well, Howard walks in one of the first meetings, and he goes like, well, just imagine like this song, let's say it's called Part of Your World. It could be whatever, but let's say it's Part of Your World. And that's the time where you walk in your first meeting and basically Howard Ashman has like this pile of songs ready to go. He like, this is me getting into the project, and boom, I already have these things. And then this is the way how you're going to be able to tell this story and get everybody involved. And that's like, where else do you see this? Like, this is just genius. It's not like, oh, I need to think about it. Give me, no, it's walking in the first meeting. Here you go. This
Yeah,
song. Let's do it.
100%. So some of the things that they said he changed on top of that were he said that Sebastian should probably be Jamaican. Uh,
Yes.
and then he also said that Ursula, he liked the fact or the idea of her based on Divine, which kids look it up if you don't know who Divine is. But it's really neat to think because apparently she looked more like Cruella de Vil at the time than she did what they ended up with Ursula, just very slim lines on her. And so he really changed that movie beyond just making music for it, right? So
Yeah. I mean, the part, and that's a part that you will find back in Waking Sleeping Beauty as well, where Glenn Keane goes like, well, I heard Part of Your World and I started drawing and I knew I had to draw Ariel, and he never did female characters. So it's like this song made Ariel look the way she looks, and it's really weird to like conceptism to take it in, but it's because Gledkin heard the song. He was like, okay, she should look this way, and I'm going to do everything to persuade him that I need to draw her, and that's what we ended up with.
yeah, and he brought in Jodie Benson. So again, you know, molding this thing, he brought in Alan Menken. He said, "Hey, this is going to be my partner," because they originally brought Howard in. When I always looked back at this, I just assumed they were just like a package deal, like the Sherman Brothers. But he chose to bring Alan Menken in. He chose to bring Jodie Benson into this, and he chose again Sebastian to be Jamaican. So many of these things that like I would never have known if it hadn't been for this. The other thing that I thought was really kind of neat about this was that he said it in such a way that they have to make a new classic that has to fit on the shelves with movies like Snow White and Pinocchio. And that's so true. Like it has to be a movie like I don't think they were thinking that with Black Cauldron. I like Black Cauldron, but they weren't thinking that. They weren't thinking this is part of the legacy that is Disney, you know, full-length animated features. This movie like, you know, fits on the shelf next to, I mean, I think that any child who would be growing up today and looking at Disney's catalog wouldn't necessarily know how distant Snow White was from Little Mermaid, or you know, from Little Mermaid to Tangled, other than animation style. I mean, they're to them it's all one big library, and he said they have to fit together.
And it was this the time where everything like came together and then just has this right fit. A lot of new artists were being pulled on from the first class of Call Arts. Um, and it was this time where things really changed and had the opportunity to change still with an art form that was believed dead just a few years prior, and they were kicked off their own lot and had to go into these trailer parks. But it's one of those things with having, I think that's the combination. And for the animation, it's like these animators sitting there not knowing when their last paycheck is going to be or when they're going to be fired. And with Howard Ashman is like, well, I mean, New York hates me, Broadway hates me, and they both have something to prove. And like it's that combination that made those three movies that were short one after another came out and just made them amazing.
Yeah, I agree. Real quick, Dawn in chat said something about like, you know, hard to imagine a thin Ursula. This is the concept art that they had for Ursula beforehand. So there was definitely a time where they were having discussions. And like I said, she feels very Cruella de Vil to me when I'm looking at that. Uh, but along the same lines of what you're talking about with the animation, so he comes in and he's doing the Little Mermaid. Like that's the first movie he's brought in to do. He does that with his partner Alan Menken. Then they start as before even Mermaid's even done. They start working on Aladdin, which is weird to me to think because Aladdin is not the next one in the list, right? So it goes, Beauty and the Beast and then Aladdin. But for some reason, they start working on Aladdin and then it doesn't seem to work out well.
It, and this is one of the things where only with these documentaries you realize that there's so much work going on the back end, and just how it, and especially the part as of Disney, fits in with Waking Sleeping Beauty and having like this view on how things work. And I think Aladdin was very special because it was one of the things that Howard did as a kid, and I think it was the same thing as with Mermaid. They talk about Aladdin, and boom, there you have all the songs that were not in the movie, songs that only came with the musical and were then edited into the movie. Just like
Right.
Proud of Your Boy is one of them, which was in the musical. Well, it was written back in the day, was not used, was put into the musical, and then they have like now this edit of the movie with Proud of Your Boy.
Yep. Yeah, it's amazing to think because I was always impressed with the lyrics of like Prince Ali. Like it's just so complex, so amazing when you're singing it. Like I had to get like a as a kid like look it up online. Like what's a coterie? Like some of these words that he's putting in there, like I don't know, I didn't know what they were. So he's working on basically three movies simultaneously because he had started work on Mermaid. They brought in Aladdin. They decided to put Aladdin on hold. They started to do Beauty and the Beast. But what I think is another neat moment that I want to show is that he after they were working on Mermaid and they basically had finished Mermaid, he found out that he had AIDS, which was a death sentence back in that time. And so 86 he got the letter from Katzenberg. 89 is when Mermaid comes out, and he passed away in 91. This is a very short window for, like you said, three just amazing movies to have come out. And then he is about to go give a talk at a Y, and he and Alan Menken to talk about bringing like musicals and animation and all that. And he gets the news on his way there that this has happened, and he still goes and he gives this talk. And so they have some of the audio from that, and just knowing that he knew at that time, it feels like you can feel what he was feeling almost when you hear him talk.
It's that's one of the parts of the movie that hits, and I when today when we were tweeting about it and sharing it on social, somebody wrote like, hey, I'll better bring my tissues. And it's one of those parts where it's hard. And even in the start of the movie where at the point that he finds out, they have a name for it. They call it HIV. They call it AIDS. When back in the day when he lost his life partner, well, ex-life partner, they were calling it the gay cancer, which at that point is just mind-blowing. But it's one of the things that with this documentary, I think it's a part of it that you can just not cut out. And it's the same for the protests against gay people with those homophobic signs, whatever, that comes back in this documentary where it's like, okay, they portrait something and they did not leave the ugly stuff out, because it is important, and it puts a weight on him. Now there's one more thing before, because you said that when Mermaid was done, I remember when they wanted to cut out part of your world, and then he just went like, over my dead body.
Right.
And that's one of those things where if I hear like any song, part of your world, like if you're in the car and you have songs and you go through them, part of your world is one of the songs that I will play. Same thing for Kiss the Girl or Under the Sea. And it's definitely a song that shapes the movie. And I think he was absolutely right that they had no right taking that out, and then it succeeded.
Yeah. Let me talk about that, but first let me talk about, if you guys are watching, we appreciate you very much. Could you give us a like? We would really appreciate it. Axel likes to have likes, and so the more likes we get, maybe we'll be able to get him back again sometime in the future. So please give us a like. If you haven't subscribed to the entertainment channel, please do, because there's a lot of good entertainment shows on here that we could talk about at the end. But again, please give it a thumbs up. It helps people to find it, and we appreciate it. So. That said,
Yes,
when you,
support Rob. He needs the budget to get me back on his show.
I do. He asked for money. I didn't know that was a thing that you could do. Would you settle for a wishable? Can I give you a wishable?
Is it squeezed?
I did feel this one up, and I'm pretty sure I'm confident in what that one is. And if we get 50 likes, I'll open it. But if not, we'll save it for another time. But when you were talking about him and not removing part of your world, they were talking about it in the movie that it was a very slow moment when this happened, and he was saying how it was a very necessary moment. And Jodie Benson said that he had an amazing gift of putting monologue to pitch. I love that line. Monologue to pitch, because that's kind of like what a musical is, and then there's differences in what a musical number does. And I talked a little bit about this on the review we did of Country Bears. In the Country Bears, they do what I call a showstopper. Everything stops, they do a number, and then they move on. It didn't really move the story along. It was just an excuse to fill some time with a song. In this one, they said that, like, Howard's theory on this was that the songs tell the story and push the plot along and move the story forward, like you were talking about. So I think that looking at it that way, like, part of your world, he said, is like when she's basically putting out there what her wish is. Her wish is to be human. Her wish is to have legs. And he says that, that she outlines all of that in this song. And then the song, Poor Unfortunate Souls, they were talking about the fact that when it starts, she's meeting Ursula, and by the end she's human, and so like how that one song moves so much along.
It's true, and it's only after, like, when you watch this, and then he says like, well, listen, with this one song, she goes from going to Ursula, not knowing her, and at the end of the song, signing away her soul to this lady, all in one song, like you say. And that's the power of this one song. It's the same power as Kiss the Girl, where it needs to happen, and then this is how we will portray it, and with a Jamaican crab.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what else are you going to do? You have to have a Jamaican crab, right? So
Yeah.
then there's talk in here that, like, including them wanting to cut that song, that someone was saying they found a memo on a copy machine that was a suggestion that they fire Howard because he was being too difficult. And again, I look back at this and go, how, like, every step of this, everything he fought for in this made this movie what it is. Everything, like part of your world, and and what Ursula was, and the music and what it meant, and bringing in Jodie Benson, like everything he fought for was like made this movie. So that to me was just like the idea that he would somebody wanted to fire him at this point. I'd love to know who that was, and what were you thinking? But I guess they just saw him as being difficult. But one of the other phrases they used in his music, or his like style of making a musical, was to have earned heart moments, Which again, I mean, that's Disney, right? You've got to care about these characters so that you care whether she is, she finds her happy ending or whether she's in peril. Like, you have those, and that's what part of your world was one of those moments. So, I just, he was a genius, and it's one of those things you look at and you go, we lost such a genius in this. He found out he was sick. He was hiding it because that was not something that you told people. This was the kind of thing you kept to yourself. And so he was afraid he'd lose his insurance. He was afraid that people would judge him. So he was hiding the sickness that he had. And when they did the press junket, there was a section in there for Little Mermaid. They brought him to Disney World, which again, my park people out here, and anytime there's something about Disney World, we're all like, yes. They brought him to Disney World to do this press junket, and at the time, he was so sick, and he would go back to his hotel room, and he would get fluids and medicine and things he needed, and then they would parade him around doing, rides. And so he was sick and kind of trying to recover, and here they were putting him into like, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, which I'm super jealous that that he gets to do it, but I'm sure at the time he was like, please, for the love of God, get me out of here. And then they had this parade, and this is the thing I wanted to show. They had this parade float of the Little Mermaid coming down Main Street, which seems very strange to just have this one. And I don't know if it was one float or not. I'm sure Tom could tell us, but it's just, this is a weird collection of these characters, and I guess it was just to tease us. But like Ariel's hair when they show her, it's just way off. I mean, it's kind of crazy looking at this now. That's not Prince Eric. That's not Ariel. These are lies. They're lying to you, kids. These are not the real characters. But it's neat to see this as a time capsule of what was happening, at that time in the parks too, to be able to see that, and that he got to go to Disney World and do this, but they were putting him on roller coasters and things while he was trying to, basically take care of himself and nurse himself. So yeah, it looks like it was a tough time.
I know this is not. It's like people are used to having WWNT be. Let's say let's say it the way it is, and let's not be gentle on Disney. But that memo that you talked about was like, hey, he needs too many takes. It costs too much money. He needs to go, and that is how you can influence and how you can change things around you. Like, he persisted and he made it great. That's, at this point at Disney, in my opinion, is all gone. There's no more standing up. It's like, yes, the dollar is king, and whatever you say, manager, we will do, because it's okay. I'll just do it and say and do whatever you say. And that's something that is missing in the company right now. And I think if the world had more people like Howard Ashman, and especially if this company had more people like Howard, they would be still making a difference day to day. And that's gone. It's not there anymore. But anyways, like, just
don't make me sad,
to
man.
say how remarkable he was.
This is already a sad movie. Don't make me sad about the company in general. We're gonna here. Let's play a game, Axel. Who are these two people?
I have no idea.
Okay, just checking.
They presented the Oscars.
Yeah, they were the presenters at the Oscars. They gave him his first Oscar for Part of Your World. It was best. No, not Part of Your World. It was Under the Sea. Won the best original song of the year there. So that was Dudley Moore and Paula Abdul. Just in case you get quizzed.
I was gonna say it. I was like, it was right there.
I mean, maybe I don't feel like you were gonna say that one. But anyway, so he won an Oscar, or I guess I got to give Alan Menken some credit for this too. They won an Oscar for that. They had worked on Aladdin for a little bit, and then they were asked to work on Beauty and the Beast. And what I find interesting about this is they show some footage of what was concept art for Beauty and the Beast at the time, and it looks so much different than what we ended up with. They're the boys right there. So it's just looking at that, just that artwork and that concept art. It just again goes to show like when they start with a movie and what they end up with is just kind of completely different. And I think that's where Howard Ashman was able to make a difference, because it was almost like blue sky. He could get in there and go, you know what, let's do it a little bit this way, let's do it a little bit that way. And one of the things they talk about is that they had concepted out an entire like opening scene of the village in Belle, and he basically took that scene and wrote a song about it. He didn't write a song and then they wrote animation. They wrote, like, they made this concept art, and he wrote a song about Belle leaving, telling the entire story of her being from this poor provincial town, going into town, hanging out with people, getting a book, getting a loaf of bread, and they were just the animators were blown away.
And that's one of the things where this documentary interconnects with Waking, Sleep, and Beauty. Because they talk a bit more in detail on Waking, Sleep, and Beauty about the whole process of Beauty and the Beast, because that was made over in London, the first drawings, and they just scrapped everything. Like everything was gone. The director just stopped, and they basically changed everything because it didn't work, and it was like, not only saying like, okay, we need to change this, but we need somebody to get in there and make sure that this movie will be good. And that's like, when you think about it that way, it's like, oh, but then bring Howard and Alan, and they were doing music. I mean, I'm not disrespectful to any of the work that the Sherman Brothers did, because I absolutely loved them. But the Sherman Brothers made music. Howard Ashman made big parts of those movies because of the songs. Now, and it's funny that you say like the first scene of that movie, because when they talk about it in the documentary, they say like, okay, it was like this 6-minute long song with different music, different tones, everything, and he didn't want to send it to Disney because he was afraid that it was not good enough.
Right.
And I mean, yeah.
I mean, looking at the making of this movie, and each one seems like it gets better, right? So there was Mermaid, and there was What Happened with Mermaid, and they show him coaching Jodie Benson and what to sing and what to say, and then they're doing Beauty and the Beast next. And for Beauty and the Beast, when I'm watching this documentary, they're all sitting around. There's Jeffrey, I think, no, that's not Jeffrey Katzenberg, but they're sitting here talking about this, the scene and what has to happen, and then they cut to. I thought it was going to be sooner than this. So here's Howard, but they cut to Angela Lansbury on the set of this, who just to me, like, there's Angela Lansbury and Jerry Orbach, Lumiere and Mrs. Potts, and she's talking about like her experiences with tea. Like, oh yeah, the tea, yeah, like the tea bag needs to be in the pot because it has to steep, and how, like, like, this is, let me school you on tea. But it's just really neat to see like this happening, and they recorded it all live. Like, they had the orchestra in there, and they had I'm gonna call her Angie. They had her in one booth, they had Jerry in another booth, and they just like put it together, and then you get to watch them creating this thing that is a part of like our past, like our Disney experience, and they're doing it. Like, I love that, and I think that's what like Hollywood Studios, MGM Studios was to all of us before, was being able to see the making of the movies. And I know now it's a little bit more computer generated, and it's there's a lot less of this like grandeur to it because it's not needed. But watching this, it just was like, to be there, it seemed like it was part of history, and I love that I've never seen it, and here it is, in this documentary.
And it's one of those moments in this documentary where you see how strong he was, because they play a phone recording where they ask like, "Hey Howard, how are you?" And he's like, "Well, I'm doing fine. I can do like 5 to 6 hours, 8 and 10. I'm totally worthless, but I can do these 5 to 6 hours." And in all these images they show, and the segments they film, you see Howard as he was before. Like, you need to do this, and we need just music needs to be this, and then try to say it this way and try to do it on this tone. And then right after, you hear this phone call when they talk like, "Hey, how are you?" And you see that the tone of his voice is so different, and it amazes me how strong he was, and he held himself during these recordings. And then once he got home to his apartment, where he needed all the help he could get, if you hear the tone of his voice, it was like totally different.
Yeah. One of the things they say about that is that, like, people didn't know he was sick, and when they finally found out that he was sick, they're like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense now." Like, they weren't paying attention to how he was kind of fading. And so it's as you see, like, him go through this, and you see that he's looking more and more like, emaciated and tired, and just it's making it tougher for him to get through the day to day on it. You think, well, why didn't people know that more? One of the things that they said early on was, for Beauty and the Beast, he said, "I can't, my very few people knew," and he said, "I can't keep coming back and forth to LA from New York." And so they brought Beauty and the Beast animators and storyboards to him to give him a pitch in New York. And they worked there, and they said he'd bring in donuts every day, but they just thought he was a diva because he was able to move the entire production. He's like, "Why do we all have to move?" Like, they didn't know that he was sick. Why do we all have to move out here and work with him? What a diva! But I think it was well worth it what they put together.
I Especially because, like, you see how fast it goes, and especially if you see the progress of the movie Beauty and the Beast, where Alan Menken says like, "Well, we were recording songs and we were working on lyrics when he was at the hospital," and that's just mind blowing. Um, any other person would say like, "Okay, I mean, I can't do this," and he just continued, and Alan Menken took little synthesizer up, and then they were making music from a hospital room, and it's really, it stuns me, like, wow,
Yeah.
he did everything until the very last day.
And it all shows. It really does. One of the things, another moment in this music, or in this presentation, that I love is when they're listening back to the music that they just recorded, and Jerry Orbach is like running through it in his head, and he's like, and he's just like, he's listening to it, and he's listening to himself, and then like trying to, like, kind of bounce around to it, and then they all clap to, like, "Yeah, that was a good, that was a great take." It's kind of amazing to me that people can do that, that they can sit down, create words, okay, I mean, words, music, both of them, and then put them together, and then bring in an orchestra and know exactly how it's going to sound and what the voices are. It's just magic. It really is. And when it comes together and it's right, like you said, it was at this time, in this place, this path led to all of these things happening. And one of the things that then they tried to do, I think, I don't think this was Howard trying to do this, but I think that in society at the time, they were trying to draw parallels to the things he was writing and the things he was going through. There was some
Yeah.
talk of the beast, and did the beast represent, you know, like him, or like was that, the AIDS problem and the people with the pitchforks and torches, and what did that mean? And then a song that he wrote that they thought was very like autobiographical about all the things that were taken away from Aladdin. That was a song that I don't think made it into the movie, the one that they were describing. But he starts saying, "I'm just going to take all these things away from you," thinking about all the things that were taken away from Howard. And his sister says, I don't think it was that. I don't think that was him. I think he literally was thinking of the best thing for the character and what would the character would be going through. But maybe it could be both, because at the time he was also with his partner building a house that his partner had designed on top of making three of the greatest animated films of all time.
I I think it's more of it's good that it lets you this space to decide for yourself, do you want to give it your interpretation or not? And it's like those things where all of a sudden you go into a rabbit hole when you watch one YouTube video and you go further and further and further. It's one of those things where you listen to the lyrics of the angry mob when they go to kill the beast, when it's like, well, the beast is this disease and people don't know and they're afraid of the things they don't know. And it's like, yes, you're right. But then on the other hand, it's like, well, no, it's a beast, and the villagers don't know the beast as Belle knows him, so probably it's nothing.
Yeah.
But it gives you this thing where it's like, okay, maybe there was more, and we'll never know. Nobody will know. Only Howard knew at that point if it was in there for a reason or not. But it leaves you the space to interpret this song however you want.
So after this, they're still working, they're finishing Beauty and the Beast, they're writing Aladdin, and Howard is, as you said, he's on his deathbed, and Alan is going and working with him to try to do, they're trying to get as much done as they possibly can in the time they have left. He passes away March 14th, 1991, without having actually seen Beauty and the Beast or Aladdin completed. Which it reminds me again a lot of Walt. I mean, he didn't get to see so much of the things he had put into play come to fruition before he passed away. They tried to take him through the story of, take him through in a cart through Pirates of the Caribbean so that he could get, a feel for that before that attraction was done. But I mean, there's so many things that he wasn't able to see here. But he, again, he worked on this. He left this legacy. Part of me says, what would he have thought about all of this? And the other part of me says, what else could he have done? Like, what was next for him?
And I think for me, to what is next, you never know what's going to be next. I mean, as I said already, I'm a big fan of the Sherman Brothers and of the work they did. But don't forget, there was at some point, there was a time where all of a sudden they were not wanted anymore at Disney. The day Walt passed away, it was like, oh, you're doing too good with Walt, and you've always been there, so now we don't need you anymore. So we don't know what's going to happen in this company, and will Howard and Alan have the same opportunities, the same chances? I like to think it in a way like, would Howard ever imagined the place that hated him, the Broadway that spit him out and so like, hey, you're a failure after Smile, and having Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin on Broadway having been so successful, it's crazy. And if you think about the cycle, it's pretty amazing.
I hadn't even thought about that. The fact that they all came back to Broadway. I mean, even Little Mermaid did. It
Yeah.
wasn't the success that the other two were, but I hadn't. That is amazing to think about. 2 gold stars for you. That's I hadn't thought about that angle on it, that it all came back to Broadway, because what I was thinking of was like he didn't get to see like, these movies completed, and then all of the like park attractions that came off of them, all of the the straight to video sequel things that happened, all of the the live action. Then maybe he would have hated all that. I don't know, but the fact that they were cherished enough, that these are intellectual properties that Disney hung their hat on, that they revived animation, and that all of that stuff, like his legacy in just those three movies and how strong it is, and just it's mind blowing to see all that, and it all was in that small span from '86 when he got the letter from Jeffrey Katzenberg to '91 when he passed away, and it's 5 years. It was actually just short of 5 years, because it was April when he got the letter and March when he passed away. To have won those Oscars, to have like resurrected Disney animation, and to reinvented basically the animated musical, is just mind blowing. And that's why I said, like, just imagining what else could have happened after that. I mean, we're grateful for the things that he's left.
Yeah, it's I still like think if we would have more people like him, or if he could have stayed with the company for longer, it would have been different for a certain period of time. And then within this company, you never know for how long. One of the things at the very end of this documentary, which kind of like spooks me out, is something that Alan Menken says, like, hey, I had like the night I had a dream where I was in the hospital. Howard says, like, hey, can you help me up? And he had like this black rope on. And when I wanted to help him up, it felt like there was nothing there. There was no weight. And he woke up. And that's when he looked at the clock. That was the moment that Howard died. And I still have like goosebumps just telling it, because like it spooked me out when he was saying that. It's, yeah, one of those moments where you think like, oh, okay.
Do Belgians get
I don't know.
goosebumps?
I don't know
I
what
didn't know
feeling
that.
you got when.
Do Belgians get goosebumps? I didn't know that was a thing.
We do. I mean, the day you asked me if I wanted to do a Deep in the Plus episode, it lasted like about a day and a half,
That sounds about right.
probably a bit longer.
Okay, that's fair. By the way, God bless Dawn. She's in chat, like trying to scrape up some likes. We're up to 46 likes, and thank you so much.
46. Come on,
I
just
know.
close the chat and get us to 50 for
Uh,
crying out loud. We've been pouring our hearts out here for Howard.
but
Do
but
it.
but she also knew that was Dudley Moore in that clip. So again, God bless you, Don. So the other thing is that the last Academy Award that he won in 1992, his partner came up and gave the speech and said this was the first Academy Award who had been given to someone who had passed away from AIDS. And so again, a very just a lot of milestones really for Howard, not only in his personal life, professional life, but also kind of in society, of this horrible sickness that he went through. And I mean, I remember, like, we were all like, what is this thing, and what's it, who could get it, and Magic Johnson got it, and we were like, well, if Magic Johnson can get it, but and luckily, there have been such strides since this time. I mean, you think of like Freddie Mercury and a lot of people who passed away from it, and just gone too soon, that were just legends. And it's a horrible thing to think about, and I think maybe for that made this tougher for me to go ahead and watch this movie, knowing again the outcome of it. But I am so appreciative that I did, because there were so many little things along the way that I learned. So we're gonna wrap this up. But before we get to your final thought, is there anything else about the movie in general you wanted to share before you give your final thought, Axel?
No, I was always I wonder why. So we have a few people watching this. Do you ever like poll the viewers how many people have seen it or will watch it after the episode?
Don't try to reinvent my show during my show.
I mean, I would like to know like how many people have seen it or will watch it after this. I mean, I'm very
Uh,
like when I saw that it was coming to Disney Plus, especially because this part was one of my was one of the parts that really got to me during Waking Sleeping Beauty, and I think it's a documentary that shows how great somebody can be in a very short amount of time. It also shows that if you set your mind to something, if you want something and you work for it and you believe in it, you can do it. And I think no matter how short the time is, as long as you can leave your legacy, that's amazing. And then, as you said, Rob, like, what would you think about the rides opening? But like, for God's sake, one of the best rides that Disney opened in the last years in Tokyo is Beauty and the Beast. And I think when he is talking about like, can it go on the shelf with those other movies? Yes, it can, because when you walk into the parks, you still see Ariel, you still see Belle, you still see Jasmine and Aladdin. It's pretty amazing. You don't see a lot of characters of a lot of movies that Disney brought out. But those ones like are amongst the favorites. If you see little girls and having their princess dress, how many are yellow and how many are Belle? Because it's Belle.
Yeah, you know what? That's the thing I usually talk about with the show is like, do we see any of this in the parks? Like, you don't see Great Mouse Detective stuff. You don't see, you do see Flubber. There are, which things left a lasting legacy, and it's a little different with this because he was part of those movies. He wasn't like this movie in particular. This documentary isn't seen in the parks, but the legacy he left with those three movies, as you said, is just so endearing, long lasting. And there, by the way, you may have just reinvented the show because everybody in chat, David says seen it. Matthew says I watched it. I watched it the week it came out. Neko said I'm interested in watching it. Archfox said not seeing any ducks, so probably not. But I love this. Bianca loves Disney. I watched it for Deep in the Plus. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I love that. And then Lauren says I've seen it when it came on Disney Plus. John says I watched it and it got me right in the feels. So, and then Jordan said I watched it to prepare for this episode of Deep in the Plus, and glad I did. So, wow, thank you guys so much.
You
That's
have some
awesome.
serious fans, Mr. Whiteside.
Oh no, it's you, man. You bring light. It's fantastic. But we did get 50 likes, so we're gonna unbox. We're gonna have a special unboxing of this after we get your thoughts. And maybe I have to send this to you now. I don't know. I know how you love a good wishable.
I mean, my thoughts on this, it's
Wait a minute. Wait. I have to present it this way.
Okay.
Are you ready? So, after
Yeah,
watching this movie, after talking about this movie, Axel, would you recommend this movie?
absolutely. I think everything is, and especially if you're a Disney fan, having a behind the scenes look is already amazing. This documentary gives you not only this behind the scenes look, but almost lets you go into this brain that brought us so much joy over the last years, still does. If you hear the music, and I think it's something that you need to see. I think it's something that your kids need to see, if only it was for awareness and especially, and I don't want to get too dark right now because I want to end on a high note, but especially, and we talked about it just before the show. This whole weird year pandemic brought out the worst in some people. If this documentary and you show it to your kids can bring some bit more empathy, can bring a different view, I think it already did his thing. So yes, if you haven't seen it, go and watch it. If you have seen it and you want to comment after the episode, like on like not the chat, but the real comments on what your thoughts were, I would love to read them. So please.
Awesome. All right. So again, when I started this, I'm not a documentary guy. Although having said that, Courtney, one of our WIGS members, we love our WIGS. Thank you guys for being WIGS members. Patreon.com/WDWNT if you're not a member. Courtney said, "Oh my gosh, have you seen the Orange Years, the Nickelodeon documentary, which is not on Disney Plus, and we're usually not allowed to watch anything other than Disney." So, but well, it was really good. I loved it. And then there was one about like Back to the Future that I thought was amazing. So I watched that one too. So I've been in a documentary mode. And so when you introduced this as an idea, went and watched this one. This is one of the few documentaries about Disney that I have not seen. Loved it. It's an hour and 35 minutes. It's a very short watch. It goes by very fast unless you're stopping and pausing and looking at things and taking notes like I was. But it's a very it's rich with Disney history. It really kind of paints the picture for what was happening during the making of some of these amazing movies that were the turning point for Disney animation. And at the same time, it's just great to learn more about this man, because I think he was a genius and gone too soon. And it was really neat to learn about it. So I'm glad I got to watch it. I would definitely recommend it. And I thank you, Axel, for the recommendation. So now, real quick, because we got the 50 likes, this is the Snackables 2 series. These are gone. This is an old thing. So, do you think it's a churro? Do you think it's popcorn? Do you think it's a turkey leg, or do you think it's cotton candy?
Just put it a bit closer to the camera.
It'll be out of focus because I don't have that. I don't. No, stop! Oh, you're trying to feel it up. No, you can't do that.
I
Sorry.
tried to squeeze it.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, it does say "squeeze me," and then it says it in French, and I know you speak French. Pressez-moi. Pressez-moi. Is that correct?
Pressez-moi.
Presssemoi.
Presse-moi.
Oh, excusez-moi, s'il vous plaît.
Presse-moi.
So I think that this one is probably churros, which is pretty exciting because I think the churros are adorable. But so let's find out. Let's find out. Bam! We got churros. Look how adorable that is. So thank you guys so much for the likes. I really appreciate it. Axel, do you want to talk a little bit about one particular show that you have a soft spot for on this channel that will be coming up with another episode?
Yes, I mean, and this is basically in the makeshift studio of Outside the Bubble, my very own baby show that I host together with Eric and Pete. This week, again, on Thursday night, 9 p.m., and we go, as the title says, try things out outside the Disney bubble. And this week we took a big risk and we went to eat outside the bubble, and I can tell you that it took its toll. It took its toll, but you'll have to watch to see it. Plus, I mean, there's a ton of fun stuff coming up. And we have a big giveaway. So if you've not seen previous episode, go and check it out because you can still enter in the giveaway. Rob, you did not enter the giveaway.
I thought I was exempt.
No, everybody's well. This show is very different than every show on the channels. Everything is possible. There's no limit.
You guys had a lot of good stuff. That the one with the wizard on the outside. What was the name of that store you went to?
That was the Magic Castle.
Okay, so I believe that used to be like an oversized Chuck E. Cheese indoor theme park thing when I lived there, which was off of Kirkman Drive, right? Is that where it is, kind of across from Universal?
Oh no! You're there's a few wizards. There's one on 192 further down the road, which is a purple wizard. This blue wizard is basically if Right now, because there's construction, you can see Kidani Village right from that part of 192.
Gotcha. Okay. So will you come to Nashville and do outside the bubble at Dollywood with me?
Um, it's far outside the bubble, but for Dollywood, I would.
Okay, good. I would really appreciate that. I think that would be huge. And then coming up on Deep in the Plus, I'm hoping to get Katie back with us next week. We haven't decided what the movie's going to be yet. But the week after that, Patrick's coming back because he has got to get High School Musical 2 out there to the people because it is driving him crazy. He's been listening to the soundtrack. He's been prepping up. He is ready to go. So we got a lot more really cool stuff coming on Deep in the Plus down the road. If you guys have any suggestions for us, please leave it in the comments below. We would love to review some movies with you and give you a reason to watch them, give you a reason to study up and sit here with us and talk about them. It's one of our favorite things to do every Tuesday night, to hang out with you guys, hang out with great people like you, Axel. Appreciate you coming on the show tonight. Thank you guys, everyone, for watching, and thanks for everybody saying kind things in the chat. It means a lot. So thank you guys so much. Have a great night, and we will see you again next week or maybe tomorrow in Park Center if you're up for it. Have a good week.